So Chris and I both apologize because this is like our third panel in a row today. So sorry about that, but and it's a beautiful day out there. And we've been joined by Alasti from Oracle as well. So I think our names are on the slides up there to identify ourselves. So thematically, at FiRe about, I want to say 3 years ago, we started talking about this idea of an infrastructure, a network infrastructure that needed to evolve to support demands of virtualization and ultimately cloud computing. And that term kind of got coined. And there was this guy by the name of Dan Lynch in the audience who came up afterwards and said, wow, this is very interesting. And then he reached out to Vint Cerf and a bunch of the pioneers of the networking industry. And they started at SRI with the Infrastructure 2.0 Working Group. And so this panel is kind of a continuation of a theme where we've been generally a year or two kind of ahead talking about some of the issues. And obviously today and yesterday, it seems like almost every other presentation has talked about cloud computing in some shape or form. And there's lots of things in IT that are being called cloud these days, which contributes to the confusion. So with our panel, what I'd like to do is just start and ask them about the types of cloud infrastructure, types of clouds there are, the trade-offs with each, and then questions to ask if you're considering it or not, some of the things that you can get from it. So I'd like to ask Chris or Ali, either one of you, I mean, what kinds of cloud computing are there out there? I've heard it attributed to everything, almost to the point where I could hold up a credit card and say this is a cloud app because it slips into a computer at the end and it gets arbitrated somewhere in the sky on demand. So what kind of types of clouds are there? Chris, I guess? Or
I can go. Sure.
Go ahead.
Certainly, it's a big name, and it's a big trend that's following it. So you can find a very broad range of definition. The funnest one I've heard is when you get internet access in an airplane. That's a cloud computing. But these are relatively in the know people who have these opinions. So it's really a very broadly used term. We see basically. Cloud is something that you get choice of on-premise, on your own premise, or off your premise. You get to have a choice of private or shared. Some people refer to it as maybe public, private clouds and stuff like that. So that's certainly one aspect, the physical aspect of it. And I think the virtual aspect of it is what is the level of abstraction you like to deal with this computing that is made on demand and is moved away from you, if you will, somewhat. And is that something that you just basically buying infrastructure and you run what you want on it as a kind of a group of servers, storage, and network, but you decide what you interconnect and how it goes? That's kind of the infrastructure aspect of the cloud.
Yeah.
As a service, yeah. Yes, IaaS.
Yeah.
Or you can kind of describe it as a platform where you put additional layers of software, certainly operating systems, and maybe further on to build things like a database as a service or a middleware as a service. And ultimately build maybe things like ultimate applications like Salesforce.com or something like that. So there's that range of abstraction on what is your comfort level of what describes a cloud. So I think there's a little bit of everything.
So platform as a service, application as a software as a service, and infrastructure as a service.
Exactly.
Chris, what are the implications? I mean, what are the trade-offs with each one of these types of approaches?
Yeah, they're really different things is what it comes down to. And for the benefit of the room, I don't know, we've been talking about cloud computing a lot, but does anyone in the room kind of, or just shake your heads, know where the term cloud came from? Knock your head now.
The PSTN? Right. That's my guess.
It's actually funny, anyone who's familiar with IT folks, IT architects over the world know that they use Visio, they draw things, and when you typically lay out an application, you draw where the servers are going to go and where they are. And if you look at different guys who drew application flows and infrastructure flows over the year, there was invariably on everyone's drawing a point where there was a Visio icon that was a big cloud, and wherever their scope of responsibility ended, that's where that cloud started. So if you were a technology guy, if you were a network guy, when you got to the internet, there was a cloud you drew and you wrote the word internet in it. And if you were an application guy, there was a cloud you drew and you wrote the word hardware in it. And that's actually where the term cloud came from. It became the thing that whatever the compute resource that you needed, that you weren't responsible for, that you just needed to be available to you, just delivered to you easily, and you didn't have to care about the underlying nuts and bolts of what it was. And that really is what cloud is. It's computing or software applications that are delivered without you having to worry about what they are. So to your question, comparing infrastructure, software, and platform, as a service are really three different things. It depends on where you are in the IT continuum. So if you're a consumer, like we all are, and everyone, especially in this room, has probably one, or I've seen people with 3 or 4 smartphones in their hands, you're a consumer of the cloud. Guaranteedly several, if not almost all of the applications running on your iPhone are running in the cloud. So when you check in on Foursquare, when you tweet, when you log into your Facebook, that data is going up. That is where the cloud lives for you. It's software as a service. You're a consumer. There is software that's providing a service to you that you're consuming through the cloud. The exact opposite end of that spectrum is where Terremark lives. That's infrastructure as a service. So instead of you as a consumer caring about the cloud, our customers are IT folks. And what they're saying is, okay, I used to have to care about servers. I used to have to care about network. I used to have to care about big buildings to put it all in. I don't want to worry about any of that anymore, so I'm going to outsource that to a provider. So the deliverable of infrastructure as a service clouds aren't something tangible that you can see on your phone. What they are is a server instance or a virtualized ability to run software somewhere. And then right in the middle is what we commonly refer to as platform. If anyone's familiar with software development, traditionally, software guys don't actually write code that runs right on a server. That hasn't happened in many years. They write code that sits in a middleware layer of software that you've probably heard terms like Ruby thrown around, or Java, .NET. These are terms even if you're not in the business, you've probably heard. Platform takes those technologies and lets them run, again, without anyone worrying about it. So you really can't compare public infrastructure and software. Which one you consume is really a function of what you're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and even to your point where, the IT people and the engineers connecting everything to the cloud, was just walking the halls of Interop within the last couple of weeks, and it seems like all the marketers are now doing the same thing. The cloud's appearing on all of their slides, and I just wonder how much of it is legitimate infrastructure, platform, software, versus, hey, we're connected, we have to say that we're in the cloud. Any opinion on just how abused that term has become and how ways you can approach it to kind of filter out some of the marketecture?
I don't think cloud computing is anything fantastic in the industry. It just started 6 months ago or even 5 years ago. It's really a continuum of computing from 1950s with IBM and all the way to now. So it's just the next progression. And I think just like any other technology progression, what it really puts into hyper-focus for any organization is that laser focus of what are you good at, what are your value adds, what do you want to make versus buy. It kind of hyper draws that line further in terms of many companies, banks, governments, all kinds of companies in the past will kind of assume they want to run their own computing. And I think people will kind of start making more conscious choices on what kind of things they relegate to others to do for them. I hate to call it outsourcing of some form, but certainly not dealing with it as a primary base of your core business. And which pieces you own, it's your IP, which pieces you're willing to kind of let go because it's not as key for you.
So
that's
Chris,
really the boundary of the cloud computing, I think, for any organization.
Ali, you just raised a really good point. You talked about the mix. So what kind of organizations look to what kind of clouds, what kind of models work for the kind of companies?
It really depends, and you're spot on about everyone calling everything cloud. And my 5-year-old twins can attest to that because they have a large and varied colored collection of squishy ball clouds from various trade shows lately because everyone has one. We look at, I think, the key as people move into the cloud right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. So we just spent 10 minutes discussing what it even is, and you could probably spend 4 hours doing that if you wanted to and still not have a clear answer, or certainly you'd have competing opinions. So I think what you're seeing is the way the world is generally shaping up are that there is, as we mentioned already, there are public and private clouds. That's kind of at the most fundamental level, there are public and private clouds. What we're seeing right now is actually the initial thrust has been in the public world. So now in Terremark's world, we define public a little differently than Amazon and Rackspace and those guys. It is still an enterprise class hardware. So what we've seen is the federal government, these types of guys, have come on and they've moved on to our public cloud. So they're consuming cloud resources that they can get on demand as they need to see fit with other similar parties to themselves. So in our case, Fortune 1000 companies, federal government. Separate from that, you have kind of the consumer sector public cloud, which is more if Google Cloud, you'll see Amazon will come up. It's no secret. They're a big cloud provider. That's more of a consumer-grade cloud. So your random developer sitting in a closet somewhere, sitting in a small office somewhere, he's going to use the consumer cloud. That's also another flavor of public cloud. And then what you're seeing a big push, and especially guys like Oracle and crew are trying to do, is private cloud. So what they're saying is that some companies are simply large enough that they have the scale to leverage cloud computing on their own. And what they're going to do is, instead of coming to a public provider, they can build their own cloud-like infrastructure. So they get all the benefits and efficiencies within their own company, but they have to keep it within their four walls, which frankly right now is important to a lot of people. Personal and Terremark opinion is I think that's more of a fear and uncertainty as opposed to a real fact, but it's real no matter how you, regardless of the reason, it's real right now. So that's kind of how the three are shaping up. If you had to.
So, Ali, Larry Ellison in the late 90s had a pretty prophetic now vision of how computing was going to evolve. And Oracle made some investments in that area, but you guys were a little early. Maybe you could talk a little bit about cloud computing and kind of your core customers, generally larger enterprises, public companies. What kind of feedback and input are you getting from them in terms of your interactions with them regarding cloud and Oracle, maybe a little bit on Oracle's experiences so far?
Well, before coming here, I got like 27 emails saying I should not sell anything, right? So I don't know what I can exactly say to that question. But I think for our customer, the number one question that kind of you decide to go this way or that way is, are you looking for best effort service, or are you looking for enterprise class, highly controlled environment where you can control what you're getting? You could be an organization, a bank, some agency, security agency in government, wherever. You have very broad needs of applications. So I think it's not necessarily possible to categorize one customer on one or the other. But certainly it's possible to categorize that customer across multiple applications and then map those applications to what they need. In many cases, there is a huge degree of concern about security that puts that in kind of more private settings or maybe not shared settings, even if it's away from you. So there's that element of it. And what you basically decide to do is kind of established by your comfort level of the step you want to take. But I think we certainly see, even in large companies, the applications that can withstand the best effort method are happy to go to either their own cloud or outside clouds, or own a cloud but not in their own premise, or own a part of it that they can dynamically dial up and down. So I would say that it's really highly application driven. And you can imagine certain applications like transaction processing of a credit card records. It's going to be a while before people have a comfort level kind of to cloud that up and put it on a public platform. But there's many other things like, you're searching for certain text message or something like that is more comfortable to put out. So I think it's quite application dependent. And our customers being Fortune 2000, there's a wide distribution of what they do, from very public, very open, very unprotected, hugely best effort to extremely strict behavior demand.
I think it's interesting. There's a perception out there, as illustrated today, that cloud is new. And to your point, you're 100% correct. There are all these folks who are afraid to move things to the cloud. But I always kind of use some examples, and this one actually worked out great. People feel like the cloud is new and it's this upcoming technology everyone's talking about, but no one's really doing it. Everybody who's sitting in this room has used the cloud, and I guarantee it, because this hotel is a preferred hotel, and they run their entire infrastructure on the cloud. So when you made your reservation to come to this conference, you were on Terremark's cloud, and when you checked in upstairs, you were on Terremark's cloud. If you bought a car and got a rebate from the federal government when they had the cash for clunkers, that was a cloud-based application that was used. If someone in your family is a veteran and they filed a health claim, that repayment came through the cloud. If your kids go online and play any one of a bunch of MMOGs like Lego Universe or something like that, you've used the cloud. So there's this perception out there that the cloud is something that's new, and it's 100% incorrect. It is, as you said, it's a complete evolution. It's really just the angst around the cloud term is a marketing angst. The technology people are well along the way of using it, and it's just a matter of when applications will move on, not if. As I said earlier today in a different panel, in my opinion, in 2 to 3 years, you will not see an application that is written that isn't written for the cloud. The only things that aren't running on cloud in 2 to 3 years will be the stuff that is legacy that hasn't been migrated yet. But anyone who's writing new applications in 2 to 3 years is going to be running them on the cloud, and I'd state that as fact.
But and clearly the cloud feels a lot like a mainframe, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Everything old is new again.
Which has been around for a while. So, Ali, you raised you put two words together that in some audiences get great applause, and for others it's incendiary when you said cloud security. So I'd like to ask Chris about cloud security and what your thoughts on maybe contrasting what's going on with private clouds versus what's going on with public clouds.
Yeah, and I disclaim this, we have a very biased opinion.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's out there for everything we say today, but especially on this particular comment. We joke within Terremark that we don't actually have sales conversations around cloud. We have security conversations that turn into sales orders. There is absolutely a perception in the industry and in the world that cloud is this insecure boogeyman in the corner that has to be feared and that you shouldn't let your personal data on, and the volumes of data that have been written about whether or not cloud is secure could fill this room. Cloud is computing. At the end of the day, cloud is running on the same bricks, copper, aluminum, fiber that your existing computing is running on. It's simply a different way of shifting and delivering it. We absolutely believe at Terremark that it's actually a more secure way of delivering it, that with the visibility and instrumentation we can get at a hardware level that doesn't exist in the traditional hardware world, we can actually ensure you're more secure on the cloud if you do it properly than you are in a traditional world. That being said, it is absolutely the boogeyman in the room. It is the elephant in every room. There is phenomenal noise around it, and if you actually, and this is what we tell people, I actually give a presentation on this quite regularly. When you start meeting your cloud provider, you actually shouldn't let them scare you away about security. You should just start asking the same questions you would ask about regular infrastructure, and you'll find that there are the same answers, and they're either acceptable to your security policy or they're not. There's this perception that the answers are different or that they can't be answered for cloud. It's absolutely untrue.
What about the issues around downtime? So Amazon's, Microsoft, multiple systems have had the incidents of unplanned downtime versus more planned downtime. Any thoughts on that? Then I'll shift to more business topic.
Well, I don't want to comment on something I don't have a first-hand knowledge on, but I can kind of assume that you signed an SLA that is best effort, and you get what you paid for, right? And sometimes you get unlucky. Most of the time, you're doing just fine. So again, I don't know about a specific incident, but it's probably along that line, where it couldn't be guaranteed that Lady Gaga streaming 100 million, blah blah, the machine is not going to crash. It's that kind of a guarantee is not there on certain type of clouds. There is on some other kinds of clouds. Just depends on your comfort level of what kind of peaks you want to prepare for, what kind of scenarios you want to prepare for. So example of Amazon, I think, is a great cloud, best effort.
Or a network administrator who's doing a little reconfiguration error.
That a little bit goes, I think, certainly at Oracle, maybe our job is to go scare people on security, as Chris was saying, just to let them have that. But we certainly think, one has to compare a good security effort or maybe a very good security effort in an enterprise setting to one that is good or very good in a cloud setting. In that comparison, I think there are certain benefits to kind of containing the equipment and the people and the expertise that you won't get from having more of a shared cloud or a public cloud. And I'm sure over time that difference is going to close down. But today it's a transition. So we are a little bit on the cautious angle of that at Oracle. And I think Chris is a little bit more comfortable because of probably what he's seen as standard data centers being basically completely open in many ways, where his data centers are quite a bit closed compared to what he's seen as the average security in a data center. Yeah.
Don't take me wrong. I think you guys are doing a great job on cloud security. I didn't mean that as a knock towards Oracle. No, but you're spot on. I think that the outage thing is an important one. So, I mean, your Gaga example is well placed. Anyone who reads the news saw what happened to Amazon yesterday. And I think that is one thing that people have to get their minds around. It is difficult for IT people to understand is that what you are saying when you go to a cloud is that I'm handing over responsibility for the infrastructure to someone else. So the fact that it's really no different than an outsourcing decision. So, but you're saying that if someone else screws up, I could have downtime. And the fact that it's cloud downtime is no different than if the systems administrator screws up and outsourced. But that's the fundamental decision to make, and it's important, again, not to make that. It's important, actually, to your point, to be very clear in terms of what you're getting, because the cloud vendors do tend to. So it's another thing I finished that presentation I referenced earlier with a big slide that says SLA. Yeah. Because you can go through an entire cloud sales pitch and have no one bring up SLA. And if you went to any other sales pitch around infrastructure, that would be the first thing they mentioned. So there's this perception that because it's cloud, you don't have to care. And I think the recent outages have proven you absolutely have to care. In fact, you have to care more because you have less control.
And there's a material difference between planned and unplanned downtime in operations, and then when it goes on for days and days. And the other issue I'd say is that when you have these multi-tenant environments and it goes down, it has much bigger impact than, say, even a single department in a company.
Sure.
It's ripples effect. So we've got about 8 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is shift now to kind of a little bit more business and a little higher level discussion about cloud. And clearly, it's a new platform, new economics for IT. People are able to develop applications quickly, faster, get them to market. There's all kinds of solutions. You can host your application on Amazon and get started. What is cloud going to do to IT ultimately, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years? How is it going to change how vendors behave and the choices that enterprises have?
Start.
Well, I can. At Oracle, we like to talk about money because ultimately all customers, that the last moment of decision is, do they issue a PO or not? So it's really a financial decision, I think. And very few people make dumb decisions. So it really comes down to what do you value as what you are going to gain by transitioning some, a lot, or everything you've got to cloud, or keeping everything completely controlled. What is going to be the metric by which you're going to measure your success? And of course, everything you measure improves all that. So is it the most important for you to have the greenest data center? Is it to have the lowest CapEx? Is it lowest OpEx? Is it to reduce your variability in your workforce by factor of 5? What is it that ultimately in that spreadsheet that you're going to do in terms of making a make-buy decision? What matters to you? And we've seen a very wide range of importance factors that are assigned to this decision making, almost making it impossible to go sit with a customer fresh and expect what they're going to say. Because even two highly similar banks or telcos or all that you would think they should be in the same kind of a mindset, behave very differently in their decisions on what is efficient and what is right for them. And a lot of it comes down to divisions of where the money is spent, the politics of who reports to who, quite honestly. So a lot of it is not necessarily even engineering-driven decisions. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the move to cloud, some, all, partial, whatever, I think is about gaining efficiency. And you have to kind of have a very good idea of what is it you want to get efficient on. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, I think your move to cloud can be very deliberate versus kind of everybody's doing it, so you should try it some to see what happens type thing.
Well, one of the things, it seems like there's just been an explosion of startups. Some of them VC funded, some of them bootstrapped, that are all leveraging this new environment. So there's a virtual explosion. It's hard to keep track, frankly, of the names of all these different companies that are doing something in the cloud. And we assume that 10% of these companies are succeed. What is the net effect of all of this early startup innovation? It feels like the late 90s again, really.
Actually, I walked into a large, I won't mention their name, but I walked into a large customer of ours the other day, and I walked out and texted my friend that I felt like I just left 1999 because of just the way their office was set up with flat screen monitors everywhere you could look and all that stuff. There has been an explosion of companies. So you have to look at, when you look at what cloud has done to the startup ecosystem, there's two things. There's one is non-tech startups. So cloud has just made it, it's simply made it easy. This is a recurring theme if you've listened to me speak for the last 2 hours in a row. Cloud has made it easier to start a business, no question. Regardless of what that business is, we've taken IT costs out of it. So I think transformationally, it's regardless of your industry, if you use technology in any way, shape, or form, cloud has made it easier to start a business. I think in terms of IT, what it has done is you're going to see a renewed interest in true software engineering, and I think that's where the startups that are focused on actually engineering better software to run in a cloud environment are the ones that are going to be successful. Frankly, the ones that replicate the Oracle model, which is kind of standardize the hardware and write all that brain into the software, those are the guys that are going to be successful because they're going to drive the commoditization of the hardware and put the value into the software layer. That's where the money's going to be made in terms of the next wave of the IT-specific startups, in my opinion.
You mentioned commoditizing the hardware. Mm-hmm. Any comment? I mean, so we've seen what virtualization has done within the server environment. What is the commoditization, or what does the cloud mean for the large hardware vendors?
I think virtualization certainly is everybody associate virtualization with cloud. The thing that doesn't get mentioned as much, I think, is clustering technology. Mm-hmm. And that has to do with, of course, if you have one computer and you want multiple images of a computer mapped to that one physical computer, that's virtualization. But the largest websites out there don't do that. because they have plenty of reasons to keep that processor or that server completely busy all the time. Clustering is the aspect of having multiple users play with multiple machines, but have those multiple machines act as one. So as the machines go away or come back, you're still consistent. So, of course, something like Google is a very large cluster as such. It's easier to do because it's a single application, but nevertheless, it is that. So it is not just virtualization, it's clustering, and all kinds of things go there. And the software, I think, is very interesting front in there is one that lets you bridge the cloud that is on-premise versus off-premise and your own enterprise data centers and kind of make that be seamless to you. Whether it's security aspect of it, identification management aspect of it, system management aspect of it, setting up, configuring, tearing down, enhancing, all of that, ultimately to a user, it should not feel like what is executing your private world, what is executing your public world. So underlying software that allows you to bridge that without having that be abstracted, without having that abstraction be seen to you, I think is very key. Because I think we're going to have very few companies have applications that can be 100% one way or the other. So, and at Oracle, we do work on helping that transition to the degree that's comfortable to people. Sometimes, these startups start with public infrastructure, and as they grow to a certain size, other parameters become important for them, so they pull it back in. And there are many examples of very public successful startups as such. So it is a transition, and over life, just like anything else, the parameters you optimize for changes, and you have to kind of change with it. And that's kind of, again, what we see.
We have about 1:20 left before the book comes out, and I know some of you are just trickling in, still are from lunch perhaps, but are there any questions for Chris or Ali? Tom's coming up. All right.
Tom Malloy from Adobe Systems, and Greg, I'm just going to ask the question I asked at lunch of the panel, which is for those of us that are consumers of these kind of infrastructures and platforms, do you have any insight that you'd like to share with us about between a public cloud, a co-location, a data center lease, and an in-house data center? It seems intuitive that there must be inflection points or places where you get to a certain scale where it makes sense to go through that evolution that Ali was just talking about. And do you guys have feel for where those inflection points are right now and where they might be going?
When you say consumer, do you mean consumer, or do you mean a company that consumes this technology?
The company that consumes the technology.
I think a lot of it is, at this point, the inflection point is less around volume and size and more about application. So the decisions that we see being made tend to, if you looked at the life cycle of a cloud customer of ours, they tend to come to us when they have a new application that they're designing from scratch and that doesn't have a home already, and then that naturally fits into the cloud, and that's where they put it. And then from that point forward, all the kind of carry forward stuff that comes with it that determines that is either legacy or can't move to the cloud because it can't virtualize, or is a giant rack cluster or something behind it, that'll move into colo. So I don't think you've hit an economic, I don't think we've gotten to a point of maturity in the market where you can actually say what makes sense economically at this volume or that volume. I think it's still very application dependent, so it really depends on what you are specifically doing. And actually, it's one of the things we pride ourselves on is the ability to mix and match those things, as opposed to, we're big fans of, although we think everything will be the cloud, today it's not. So you need to be able to put this in the cloud, this in a virtualized environment, this in co-location, and this back in your own office, and make sure it all works together.
I think from an Oracle biased, but I think correct perspective, I would say that people want to be bothered with less. They want to be abstracted away from the details and have those details be taken care of for them. So they want that hardware-software combination. They want to go higher and higher in dealing with their own problems and not with underlying infrastructure. So I think someone will do well to kind of worry about the essence of what they're trying to do and kind of render the lower levels, which are less value add for their immediate business, to somebody else to take care of.
So, Ali, Chris, thank you guys very much for your thoughts on cloud and infrastructure 2.0.
Thank you.